Hey guys, so you've heard the news. President Yoon has been impeached by the National Assembly. Now it's up to the Constitutional Court to render a ruling. They have the final say whether he completely gets impeached and completely gets taken out of office. It's the Constitutional Court. Their job is to rule on issues regarding the Constitution. But the funny thing is the Constitution was last amended or updated in 1987. That's almost 40 years ago. It's almost like using an old Windows 3.1 or DOS, or, it's as if you haven't upgraded your software in like 30 years. There have been efforts in Korea throughout the years to try to make some amends, and most recently with Cho, who now has been imprisoned, there have been efforts. But what exactly in the Constitution could Yoon Suk-yeol be impeached on, and compare it to actually two impeachment cases that we do have in Korea? For better or for worse, impeaching your presidents pretty often starts to clarify impeachment law. So Korea's constitution was first drafted and adopted in July 1948. And it was amended and revised 9 times, and the last time was 1987. Not all those revisions were good, or not without their controversy. President Park Geun-hye's dad, Park Geun-hye, when he was president, wanted to amend it so that he could essentially be a dictator for life. Now, to give some comparison, Korea last amended its constitution in 1987, but in the Philippines, in 1987, they actually made more clarifications on what you can impeach the president and other leadership positions for. And they introduced betrayal of public trust as the grounds for impeachment. And that's in addition to treason, bribery, graft and corruption, culpable violation of the Constitution, and other high crimes as grounds for impeachment, also present in their 1973 Constitution. Oddly, the timeline for their constitutional amendments and stuff kind of mirrors Korea's. Anyhow, so there is a difference between the criminal charges and the impeachment charges. And when we're protesting it, when we're voting on it, when we're mixing it all together. So the next question is not how much punishment. Is he going to go to jail for life? Is he going to get the death penalty? The next question really is, are we going to complete the impeachment of President Yoon? Because as it stands right now, he has been removed from his duties, but he's still the president, and the prime minister, Han Duck-soo, is kind of like a lame duck. Before you even get started, like you're hiring for the lame duck, that's essentially the prime minister position. So they have 6 months in the Constitutional Court to rule. Most likely 2 to 3 months. And then after the ruling, within 2 months, you have to have a presidential election. So the longest timeline that we're looking at is a total of 8 months, which would mean sometime in August, we would have a new president in South Korea if everything gets approved, if the impeachment goes through. Otherwise, most likely, I think we're looking anytime between April to June. Most likely, we'll probably have a new president in South Korea. Now, the difference between criminal charges and impeachment charges, it was really hard for me to find what was impeachable because there's not much in the Constitution. In Korea, it's much more flexible. So like the example I gave you about the Philippines, they got more specific. They decided as a country, we need to be more specific. Philippine viewers, whether that worked or not over the past almost 40 years? Can you please let me know in the comments? Was it good to make more clarifications and make the bar lower for impeachment, or did that create more problems? Because the way that it's in Korea is that it's very loose and open for interpretation, and it's up to the Constitutional Court judges to decide whether the president's actions violates the Constitution. They also make sometimes some comments on the criminality, but largely from what they have how they have ruled in the past is they like to stay out of the criminal aspects if it doesn't directly coincide with their ruling on the constitutionality of the impeachment. So they are saying that, that's for other courts to decide in court cases afterwards. Because right now, the president still has immunity from criminal prosecution. The only criminal charges that the president can face while in office, even after being impeached by the National Assembly, the only criminal charges that he can face is insurrection and treason. So essentially like turning your back on the country. It's almost like if you're a dad and you're having an affair, you're still gonna have your dad duties, deal with the affair later. But if you're doing something that really threatens the child or violates, what it really means to be a proper dad, then only that you can face charges while you are, in the position in this analogy, and you'll deal with the affair later. Although the affair can color, what you're doing now. However, it's a very strict constitutionalized reading of the tea leaves. So that's the difference, essentially. They're both present and they're both ongoing. And a lot of the times, the investigation, so there's right now a prosecutorial investigation into President Yoon and a police investigation, and that uncovers a lot, and some goes into the criminal bucket and some goes into the constitutionality bucket. And sometimes what should stay in the criminality bucket, I think it's dumped into the overall argument towards the Constitutional Court. Because as we'll see, especially from the Park Geun-hye case, there were a lot of charges that she faced for impeachment that were not recognized by the Constitutional Court, because they're saying like that's not really a constitutional violation, but more of a criminal violation. Similar to what we saw with the whole Jin case with Adore versus Hybe. Even the judge was like, well, this was betrayal against a Hybe, but not betrayal against Adore. So these kind of technicalities really matter in these types of situations. First of all, President Yoon said, yes, thank you for voting for impeachment on me, but I'm going to fight until the end. So he is going to fight this court case with the Constitutional Court, and he may start with some procedural issues. There are officially 9 judges on the Constitutional Court, but there's only 6 right now. There's 3 vacant seats that haven't been filled. In order to impeach a president through the Constitutional Court, 6 judges out of the 9 have to rule and say they agree with impeachment. So that's to be a 2/3 vote. So right now we have 6. That means all 6 have to agree. However, there is a little bit of a sticking point. By law, under the Constitution, 7 are required to hear the case. So they only have 6. So are they just going to delay this indefinitely until they can fill the 7th seat? Or are they going to find a workaround? Or is there some other clause in the Constitution that they can allow just 6 justices to be there? And then also by April 2025, 2 out of the 6, their seats are going to expire. And they need to be either extended or reappointed, or you got to get new judges in there. So that's going to compress the timeline and give more of a pressure to get this done by April. And so then that would mean by the end of June-ish, most likely, we'll have a new president of South Korea. Because it doesn't look good. Oh no, it doesn't look good. Chances for President Yoon do not look good at all. Okay, so what does the Korean Constitution actually say about impeachment? What you can be impeached for? There really clear about the process of impeachment. It's the National Assembly that's supposed to pass the initial motion, and then it gets confirmed by the Constitutional Court. But in between then, okay, then for what can they actually be impeached on? It's a lot less clear. So Article 65 says that the National Assembly is the first legislative body or governmental body that votes on impeachment. And then Article 111 says the Constitutional Court judges on the following matters: the unconstitutionality of a law upon the request of the courts, impeachment, dissolution of a political party, disputes between jurisdictions between state agencies and local governments, and petitions relating to the Constitution as prescribed by law. So it doesn't really say after impeachment. It doesn't have an instruction manual. Article 113 just talks about how many justices, 6 out of the 9 that you need in order to pass this decision on impeachment or the unconstitutionality of a law. Article 114 just talks about how long the justices serve on the Constitutional Court, 6 years, and whether they can join political parties. They can't join political activities. It's more about, what they have to do, but it doesn't have an instruction manual again on how to impeach a president. And Article 84 is the one that outlines specifically the president shall not be charged with a criminal offense during his tenure of office except for insurrection or treason, because you want the president to be able to do their job without a lot of weaponized distractions. Yes, if they do something bad, they should face the consequences of it. But for example, if you wanted to manipulate and game the system, and if you have a lot of infractions that they can be charged on, criminally, then if you want to knock out South Korea's president and get them on little itty bitty charges, then that would be destabilizing. And if you see somebody's constitution, you really start seeing what they're willing to put up with in order for a greater good in their mind, or what they think nope, that's the line, and we're willing to deal with any kind of negative ramifications for having more laws. You get to see a country's way of operations. Okay, so let's look at some examples of previous impeachments. So before President Yoon, in the modern era, there were 2 impeachments, one successful and one unsuccessful. So the unsuccessful one was President Roh Moo-hyun in March of 2004. The National Assembly impeached Roh Moo-hyun. And essentially, Roh Moo-hyun's political party had reorganized, and they did a rebranding, and he said, hey, that's really cool, I endorse them. So he was giving the blessings for this new political party. However, the National Assembly got pissed off, and they said that he's doing election interference, and he is putting his thumb on the scale of National Assembly elections, and so that's interfering with democracy. Well, the Constitutional Court restored his presidency because he also, had to be immediately suspended from his duties, and then the prime minister took over. But 2 months later, the Constitutional Court said that he technically violated the Constitution, but it was not serious enough to warrant removal. So in this situation, it can give some hope to President Yoon that maybe you technically violated the Korean Constitution, but it's not serious enough for impeachment. So is there a case where a president was impeached for technically violating the Korean Constitution, but then was able to keep his job? Yes, Roh Moo-hyun in 2004. Now let's go to 2017 for the successful impeachment of President Park Geun-hye. Now, I was in Korea during this whole time, very in the thick of things, in the weeds of this whole situation, but actually now that time has passed and looking back on it, I'm glad I got this opportunity because everything was so compressed and convoluted all at the same time. And it's easier now to sparse out the constitutional question and then the criminality of it all, where she was sentenced to about 25 years in jail and had to pay, like, I think about a $20 million fine. So her situation had a lot of really just kind of like a pot roast of charges against her, and not all of them actually were successful in terms of determining whether she would be impeached. And in this case, it really does look like it was because of her best friend, who's been accused of being the daughter of like a cult leader. Because of her best friend's involvement in the corruption, that I think was enough to be unconstitutional. I would wonder, in some sort of constitutional legal laboratory, if you could do the test, had President Park Geun-hye just done the corruption all by herself, would she still have been impeached? Because the problem with her corruption, the corruption was bad, but even then, they said that she wasn't really benefiting from the corruption. It was her best friend, Miss Choi, who was benefiting from the corruption. But it was more so the transfer of documents, of state secrets, of having the best friend be a puppet master and actually make decisions that only the president should be making, that starts to make it unconstitutional. Had President Park herself just been very greedy and wanted to do all of this corporate shakedown and setting up foundations for all of herself, I really wonder whether she would have been impeached, because I think the thing that tipped it over was transferring the top secret information, or information that shouldn't just go to your best friend. That back and forth, I think, was the thing that really tripped it over to the whole constitutionality of it all. Back then, it was still supposed to be 9 justices, but they only had 8. There was 1 vacant seat. And initially, President Park's lawyers were saying, like, well, we don't have all 9. We can't move forward. They're like, no, sorry. We don't have to listen to that part. We have to make a decision. We can't just be held back based on that kind of a procedural thing. So that it gives less hope for President Yoon delaying, because there's only 6 justices and not the 7 necessary to hear a case. President Park also tried to say, well, the vote in the National Assembly itself was not valid because the charges that they're putting against me were based mainly on news reports and not an official investigation or a probe. And even the Constitutional Court just struck that down, saying we have to respect the vote of the National Assembly. And also, it didn't look like that they had gathered information in that bad of a way. That's a little bit loosey-goosey, but that's how flexible this type of ruling is. So mainly President Park was charged with abuse of a power to appoint and dismiss officials, failure to protect people's right to life during the Seoul ferry tragedy, infringement of the freedom of press by forcing a newspaper company CEO to step down. Those charges were not enough for impeachment. And they also clarified that being incompetent is not a big enough reason to be impeached. You can be bad at your job. But the court said a big no to Park's relationship with Choi Soon-sil, especially when it came to abusing executive powers and Choi's interference in government affairs. Now, to the court and to the public, it's interfering. Miss Choi would be thinking that she was helping. Oh, she was assisting President Park, writing her speeches, redrafting her speeches, leading meetings. I remember there was one recording where Miss Choi was running the cabinet meeting or the special secretaries meeting, like basically the top officials meeting in the Blue House, and she was ordering stuff along, and then President Park was like, oh, well, I have oh yeah, like she was kind of the minion trying to say like, I have something to say, or oh yeah, that's a good idea. And even Miss Choi told President Park to eat some fruit because it was good. Like, what? Like as if she was the president. And I think that's what people in the Constitutional Court did not like. It was more of that, but then to add the oomph to it, it was linked to financial crimes, bribery, shakedowns, that kind of a corruption, especially targeting all of the nation's top jebels. So you're getting that sort of behind the scenes pressure as well, as to send a statement, none gonna be another shakedown like this. In a nutshell, if you want to know how Ms. Choi should be on the tenure track at the Jezebel Institute of Treachery once she's out of jail, if she survives that long, she essentially set up foundations and corporations that would benefit from the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. So it's very much tied to government spending and corporate contributions. So she set up an advertising agency, and she set up a foundation that would work on public image of the Olympics and any other kind of government contracts. And then the advertising agency would also have another budget to promote it, and they would circulate the money throughout it. And then Ms. Choi wanted to separate herself, so she appointed other people to be the frontmen who she controlled. But of course, lest we forget, the reason why this whole thing came about was that, okay, Miss Choi was like a bunny auntie before bunny uncles, came to the stage in 2024. Oh yes, back in the 2010s, Miss Bunny Auntie was definitely going around and gobbling up them Fig Newtons. And one of them Fig Newtons got mad that he was being abused. He had to walk the dog and probably get abused by her verbally. Like if you hear the recordings, like she had like a potty mouth. And so he just whistle blew and threw her tablet over to the news media, and then all this stuff started coming out, and especially the top secret documents from the Blue House. That was odd. So that's what brought started to bring all of the threads, out of Miss Bunny Auntie's knitted sweater. So then after President Park was impeached and had it finalized by the Constitutional Court, she lost all of her immunity from criminal charges. And that's when the criminal cases started against her. And she was convicted of 16 of 18 charges against her, fined 18 billion won, sentenced to 24 years in jail, although she was pardoned by President Moon, I believe in 2021. But some of it, that's when you get the nitty-gritty of, setting up companies to create these nonprofit entities that would suck out money and extort money from corporations, and specific shakedowns and bribery with specific corporations. I mean, it involves like Samsung, Hyundai Motor, Lotte Group, KT, POSCO, CJ Group, SK Group. Although it's CJ Group, it was more about her vendetta, President Park's vendetta to sack CJ Group vice chairwoman. I believe that's Mickey Lee. The lady who brought us Parasite. She's the lady that, accepted the award at the Academy Awards. So that got in there. And the thing that I'm glad she got convicted of that really shocked me at the time was that she was convicted as a collaborator in the compilation of a blacklist of cultural figures. So essentially, if you were an actor, an artist, a director, or a writer, and you signed a petition about this Howell Ferry incident, you were put on a blacklist, or for whatever any other reason you were put on a blacklist. And if you applied for any kind of state funding or projects that involved the Ministry of Culture where the president has some control in, you would be out. And the way that she argued was like, well, there's some people on this blacklist who still got grants. Oh, please. Those are the ones that just fell through the cracks. You made the list, though, and you were acting upon it. Just because you didn't have a 100% success rate doesn't mean that you were not guilty of making a blacklist and punishing people for that. That is ultimate fascism. So what is President Yoon being charged for in this impeachment battle? Now, I think he has a much harder case for him to win, much easier case for the Constitutional Court to sign off on, because not only is he being charged with impeachment, he's specifically being charged with insurrection as the biggest reason for impeachment. And of course, right now, with all of the other investigations going on, those other pieces will probably be added to the actual case. But to get it started, it was insurrection, of course, declaring the martial law declaration and deploying troops to the National Assembly. And the reason why it's a bit harder for him is that immediately right away, he may lose his immunity from criminal cases because he committed the worst of the worst, which is treason or insurrection. And so this has been very cleverly created to be a very strong case against him. And I bet now that you have 20 years of lawyer experience going through 2 other presidential impeachments, there's a lot more clarity on how this could play out. And also early on, so quickly early on, we have testimony against him that really does support the claim of insurrection. One of the colonels who led the Special Forces unit that was sent to the assembly already said, hey, I received orders to forcibly remove lawmakers with a number in mind to prevent 150, because to stop martial law, you need 50% vote by the National Assembly to cancel a president's martial law order. And he said, well, yeah, 150 was the magic number. I was supposed to stop them from voting. South Korea's criminal law defines insurrection as any attempt to overthrow government organs established by the Constitution or to render the exercise of their functions impossible by force. By force, which can't be any clearer than martial law. He made the ultimate easy layup, because if it was by force, through back channels, or by suggestion or leverage or threats or veiled threats, okay, who knows? But he made it extremely clear, mobilizing the highest force in the land, military force, to shut down a government organ. So if he were convicted of insurrection, President Yoon may face even the death penalty. Korea doesn't enact on the death penalty, but I believe it's still on the books technically, but they haven't done it in such a long time. Or he can get life imprisonment, probably get pardoned, after spending some time in jail. But still, life imprisonment, that's a lot more harsh than even Lee Myung-bak and President Park Geun-hye. So already legal experts are saying that his martial law declaration itself really has no legal grounds. So the justification that a president could make about, hey, this is an emergency and it falls under these categories in the Constitution, that therefore it's fine for me to have declared martial law. That's something he can't argue, because it doesn't look like his reasons of desperation in the face of the political opposition who was trying to paralyze his government. Again, I don't know who didn't tell him. Every single opposing political party tries to paralyze the current president. It is just an unfortunate part of the political game. And then President Yoon also contradicts himself by saying like, well, I didn't expect the martial law to actually be taken that seriously. I expected the National Assembly to reverse it. And you can see this by the fact that I didn't mobilize the tens of thousands of troops that would be necessary for martial law in the past. I mean, but that was like over 40 years ago. Maybe you needed a lot more. Maybe now a lot fewer people can do the same job. But in any event, that still doesn't justify declaring martial law, because martial law has to be extremely serious and the last resort option. It's not something where you're basically saying like, oh, well, I just wanted to send a message, that I'm serious about getting this budget passed. Also, the former deputy director of South Korea's National Intelligence Service also blew the whistle. He said that he was ordered to arrest a broadcaster and a union official, as well as several political leaders, including a sitting judge and a former chief justice of the Constitutional Court and other political leaders. So if what he is saying is true, that is just so clear that he will be out of there really quickly. And maybe that is why the former defense minister tried to unalive himself, because he realizes how cut and dry this case seems to be. So the first hearing for the Constitutional Court will be on December 27th, day after the Squid Game world premiere. Ding. And President Yoon has to cooperate with these investigations, although he turned down over the weekend a request and a summons for being questioned. Maybe he should go consult with New Jean's mama, because according to New Jean's mama, she goes ahead of time, even before she's called in. She just wants to get it out of the way and then call a press conference about it. So it doesn't look good for President Yoon. If you just wanted to get a litmus test of yes or no, is he going to get fully impeached by the Constitutional Court? I think compared to the two previous impeachments, one successful and one unsuccessful, his case is really bad for him, which means that it's most likely 80+% of a chance that he is going to be removed from office. So what do you guys think? And do you think President Yoon may get the death penalty or life imprisonment, especially as a signal to all the other little Yoon Suk-yeols out there, or maybe even Lee Jae-myung who might be eyeing some things, to not go down that road of fascism anymore with South Korea's democracy? All right, guys, put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.